Imagine you are driving home late at night. The road is quiet, the dashboard lights glow softly, and you are thinking about nothing more complicated than getting home safely. Suddenly, red and blue lights flash behind you. You pull over, the officer approaches your window, and then a question comes that changes everything in the next few seconds. Do you have any weapons in the vehicle? For millions of law-abiding gun owners, that moment can be confusing, stressful, and legally complicated. Not because they intend to break any law, but because the laws surrounding firearms during a traffic stop are surprisingly complex, and they can vary depending on where you are, what permits you hold, and how you respond in those first few moments. Before we go any further, think about this and answer honestly in the comments. If a police officer asked you during a traffic stop whether you had a firearm in your vehicle, what would you say? Would you immediately tell them? Would you stay silent? Or would you ask a question first? Your answer to that situation reveals something important. Most people believe they know the law in moments like that. But the reality is that many gun owners, even responsible and experienced ones, misunderstand how traffic stop laws actually work in practice. And sometimes those misunderstandings can create legal problems that never needed to happen in the first place. To understand why, it helps to begin with a simple fact about the United States legal system. Traffic stops are one of the most common interactions between citizens and law enforcement. Millions occur every year. Courts have spent decades defining exactly what officers are allowed to do during these stops and what rights drivers still retain during that encounter. One important legal principle was clarified in a case decided by the United States Supreme Court in 1968 called Terry v. Ohio. In that decision, the court recognized that police officers may briefly stop and question individuals when they have reasonable suspicion that criminal activity may be occurring. That concept of reasonable suspicion later influenced how courts evaluate traffic stops and officer safety during those encounters. But the situation becomes more complex when firearms are involved. In the United States, the legal right to possess firearms is protected by the Second Amendment of the Constitution, which states that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Over time, the Supreme Court has interpreted this amendment in several important decisions, including District of Columbia v. Heller in 2008, which confirmed that individuals have the right to possess firearms for lawful purposes such as self-defense. Later cases, including McDonald v. Chicago in 2010, clarified that this protection applies to state governments as well as federal authority. And more recently, the 2022 decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruen addressed the issue of carrying firearms in public for self-defense. These cases collectively shape the broader legal landscape surrounding firearm ownership in the United States. But they do not eliminate the reality that states retain authority to regulate certain aspects of firearm possession, transportation, and licensing. That means a driver's legal responsibilities during a traffic stop may differ depending on which state they are in. For example, some states require individuals who are carrying a concealed firearm to immediately inform a police officer during a traffic stop. These are sometimes referred to as duty to inform states. In those jurisdictions, the law explicitly requires disclosure if a person is carrying a concealed weapon and has a permit. Other states do not impose such a requirement. In those locations, a driver may choose whether or not to mention a firearm unless the officer specifically asks. This difference is important because it demonstrates one of the most misunderstood aspects of firearm law in the United States. Legal obligations are not uniform nationwide. Consider a hypothetical example that legal educators often use when explaining this issue. A driver who lives in a state where disclosure is not required may become accustomed to remaining silent about a firearm unless asked. If that same person travels to a state where disclosure is mandatory, their normal behavior could suddenly place them in violation of the law, even though they intended to comply with legal requirements. This kind of situation illustrates why legal awareness matters so much for anyone who owns or transports firearms. The issue is not simply whether someone has a lawful right to possess a firearm. The issue is also understanding how that right interacts with state regulations, police procedures, and constitutional protections during real-world encounters. During a typical traffic stop, the officer's initial priority is safety. Courts have consistently recognized that traffic stops can involve uncertainty for officers because they are approaching an unknown situation on the side of a roadway. For that reason, the Supreme Court ruled in Pennsylvania v. Mims in 1977 that officers may order a driver to step out of a vehicle during a lawful traffic stop. Later decisions extended that authority to passengers as well. These rulings were based on the court's conclusion that allowing officers to control the physical environment of the stop reduces potential safety risks. From a legal standpoint, this means that if an officer asks a driver to exit the vehicle during a stop, the request is generally considered lawful as long as the original stop itself was valid. Now consider how a firearm might change that dynamic. If an officer becomes aware that a weapon is present, their procedures may become more cautious. That does not automatically mean the driver has done anything wrong, but it may influence how the officer approaches the situation, how they give instructions, and how long the stop lasts. Many legal experts emphasize that calm communication and clear compliance with lawful instructions can significantly reduce misunderstandings during these encounters. At the same time, constitutional protections remain in place. The Fourth Amendment protects individuals from unreasonable searches and seizures. This means that an officer cannot automatically search a vehicle simply because a firearm might be present. Courts generally require probable cause or consent for a full search of a vehicle. The concept of consent searches is another area where misunderstandings frequently occur. Officers may ask drivers if they consent to a search of their vehicle. Legally, individuals have the right to decline such a request unless the officer has an independent legal basis for the search. Legal scholars often point out that the language used in these situations can be confusing. When an officer asks a question, it may sound like a command even when it is legally a request. Understanding the difference can be important, but it also requires careful communication and respectful interaction during the stop. Another factor that complicates firearm laws during traffic stops is the concept of reciprocity. Reciprocity refers to whether one state recognizes the concealed carry permits issued by another state. Some states have broad reciprocity agreements, recognizing permits from dozens of other jurisdictions. Others recognize very few or none at all. As a result, a firearm that is legally carried in one state could become unlawful the moment a driver crosses a state border if the permit is not recognized there. Because of this, many legal organizations advise gun owners who travel to review the laws of every state along their route. Even small details, such as how a firearm must be stored in a vehicle, can vary from state to state. Federal law also plays a role in certain circumstances. The Firearm Owners Protection Act includes a provision often referred to as the Safe Passage Rule. Under specific conditions, this law allows individuals to transport firearms through states where possession might otherwise be restricted, provided that the firearm is unloaded and stored in a locked container separate from ammunition. However, legal experts frequently emphasize that the details of this protection are narrowly defined and sometimes misunderstood. Court interpretations have varied over time, which is why travelers are encouraged to verify the most current legal guidance before transporting firearms across state lines. All of these legal layers reveal a larger truth. Owning a firearm responsibly involves more than understanding how to use it safely. It also requires understanding the laws that govern possession, transportation, and interaction with law enforcement. Traffic stops are one of the moments when these legal rules intersect most directly with everyday life. They are brief encounters, often lasting only a few minutes, but they can raise questions about constitutional rights, state regulations, and officer safety all at once. Think again about that moment when the red and blue lights appear in your mirror. What thoughts would go through your mind? Would you feel confident about what the law requires? Or would you hesitate, unsure whether speaking or staying silent is the correct choice? Experiences shared by legal professionals show that many drivers encounter uncertainty during these situations. That uncertainty does not necessarily come from bad intentions. It often comes from the simple fact that firearm laws are complex and constantly evolving as courts interpret them and legislatures update regulations. In the coming years, additional legal decisions will likely continue shaping how firearm rights and public safety concerns are balanced within the American legal system. Court cases, legislative debates, and public discussions will all play a role in that ongoing process. For now, the most important takeaway is awareness. Understanding the laws that apply to firearm ownership and transportation can help individuals navigate interactions with law enforcement calmly and confidently. And that awareness begins with asking the right questions. What does the law require in your state? Does your state require disclosure during a traffic stop? Are your permits recognized in neighboring states? Those questions may seem simple, but the answers can make a significant difference in how a routine traffic stop unfolds. So once again, think about that scenario. You see the flashing lights, you pull over, the officer walks toward your window. If you legally own a firearm and one is present in your vehicle, what would you do in that moment? Would you speak immediately, wait for the officer to ask, or say something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the experiences and perspectives of responsible gun owners often reveal just how varied these situations can be.